Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchy Ted.
And today we delve into the most fantastic Dungeons and Dragons mounts you could think about.
Hey guys, jump down to the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy the newsletter. It's a great way to get gaming tips as well as learn how to game with Nerdarchy.
Fantastic mounts in Dungeons and Dragons.
And where to find them?
And where to find them. So we've done several mounted combat videos, mounted character builds, but what about mounts in general? So they've shown up a bunch of places in our games.
They have. We've had. It's not so much a mount, but you know, we've had in the party. There's been belays, elks, giant spiders, all kinds. You currently have a boar, so like it's. All of these ones have been outside the normal spectrum from what typical mounts are.
Yeah, and in my game, I have a goblin ranger that rides a spider. There's actually two goblins, and they ride the spider everywhere. So you know, so there's that. I introduced a mountain tribe of orcs called the Olingai, and Olingai in their language is sacred beast. And their sacred beast is the mountain goat, the giant mountain goat, and they ride, they ride them. They use them for milk and make cheese, and basically, it's very much part of their lifestyle. Now, fantasy games are just rife with, fantasy games, fantasy literature are rife with all kinds of examples. Also, in your game, did you mention the elk?
I think I said moose, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, because Jeremy's paladin rode an elk in one of my previous games. That was kind of short-lived. Nerdarchy, Ryan's paladin, his mount was a scorpion made of copper coins. So there's so many cool things that you can do. And then like Lord of the Rings, we saw was it either The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, that trilogy. We saw wargs, we saw giant goats, we saw the giant boar, and we saw the elk. So like these things are all over the place. In a fantasy game, there is no reason why you should be riding a horse.
It's true. I mean, there's even tales of elven maidens riding unicorns.
Well, yeah, that's another one that's pretty popular. If you go to the 1980s, the good Clash of the Titans movie, you have Perseus and he rides the Pegasus. But I mean, that's from mythology too.
Right.
So there's all these cool things. Dragonlance was based around basic character.
People riding dragons.
Yeah. Now, I feel like when you get into riding a dragon, that's more of a partnership than it is you've got a mount. Right. Yeah. Or the dragon has a pet, one or the other.
It's definitely either a partnership or you're the pet, because let's face it, especially with the lore that Dungeons and Dragons has about dragons, they're not just something mindless to follow instructions. They're their own creature, their own entity that, in order for you to ride them, they need to be around a long time.
They're effing dragons. So we've also done quite a few videos where we talk about mounted characters. We've got our Monster BFF series where I think there has got to be no less than 3 different ones that we've done having to do with a humanoid and their mount. We had goblins and a giant wasp. We also had hobgoblins on face spiders, the orcs on griffins. Mm-hmm. Which were all, so it was all us trying to do like the non-standard mounts for those races and trying to make it interesting. I also, again, Lord of the Rings, freaking giant eagles. Except for, again, that was more of a partnership because the giant eagle has an actual 8 intelligence. So, that it's as smart as your human warrior, right? And, if you actually have an orc warrior from Volos Guide to Monsters and use the orc race in there, it could actually be smarter than the orc warrior fighter.
That's hysterical.
In one of our old games, one of our AD&D games, I had the Eagle Riders, which was basically a civilization built around this kingdom of humans, and and the eagles, and they had this kind of like partnership, and their knights, rode the giant eagles into battle. Now again, I don't know if in AD&D giant eagles were as smart as they are now. I think they kind of were, because it really is taking from the lore of the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. So I really feel like Gary Gygax just modeled the giant eagles off of those, and they had, I think even in early editions they had language. I think giant owls are the same way, and I don't think either of them are actually beasts, but they're actually considered monstrosities. They're so very monstrous.
Indeed. But speaking of other giant birds to ride, for those rife with many hours spent playing the Final Fantasy series, the chocobos, which you could kind of just use up an ostrich and throw them in your world, because anyone who played any of the Final Fantasy games, you throw a chocobo option in there, and they're like, all right, I'm in, done.
Well, you also, I believe in the monster section, you have Axebeak, which is would be very similar. It's a giant flightless bird. So, like, there is something you could use in the back of your monster manual and slap it in your game. And why not? Like, it really, when you start adding these combinations, it just adds another layer of richness to your world, and makes it a little bit different than the other worlds, especially if you can use a combination that maybe you haven't seen before, or your players haven't seen before.
In World of Warcraft, they have mounts galore. I haven't actually played the game, but in Warcraft 3, there was I think the Night Elves rode giant cats, and for me, me being a cat lover, I think it's badass if you could actually ride a cat. I don't know.
You don't really need a giant, because I believe both lion and tiger are large. You're a medium creature. They're one size bigger than you.
Yeah, that's true.
That's all you really need. And I feel like if you're getting into elves or halflings, things that really have light builds, anyway, it does make sense. It does feel a little weird that I like to use them as mounts, because even though they're really big, they're really big without seeming big enough.
I agree.
I guess it's because they're low to they're kind of low to the ground.
Lion Witch in the Wardrobe. There is a time when Lucy is riding on the back of Aslan.
She's also a child,
but
though.
So
there was a time where my kids could have rode my dog, So, and speaking of that, is it still in 5th edition? I believe in Pathfinder and 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons, you could buy a riding dog right out of the player's handbook. So while it's not completely fantastic, it's still beyond the norm. So it's in there, but definitely you can see, when you have Mastiffs and Saint Bernards, Great Danes, these really large dogs, especially if they're bred as mounts or for war, I could definitely see halflings and gnomes riding them without too much trouble. Mounts are going to become these NPCs in the party. The players are going to start to care about them, and it's going to impact how they interact with not only the mounts, but the other players in the group as well, as they actually start ranking the pecking order of the party, and the mount might move up higher than some of the players. Right,
and we saw some of that in various sources of pop culture.
So that happens now. My dwarven character has a boar mount, and he's very attached to it. Where Mark is always messing around. Mark's character is always messing around, talking about making bacon out of him and stuff like that.
So if Boris was a little bit more intelligent, there'd be some room to really finagle with that. But just being a trained boar, I really didn't feel there's a whole lot of room to have him really responding.
Not yet. We do have a druid in the party.
1,000 gold.
Awaken will happen. I'll tell you, it will happen.
So mounts are a special thing, and as players or as DMs, they do need to be taken into an account. And realistically, let's look at area effect spells. How much is that going to really change the dynamic of the player's choice when the AoEs start flying? And it's like, all right, well, I'm not a paladin. I don't have the ability to shield this mount from danger. is this a mount that I'm riding during combat or in between combats? You know, do I ride to the combat and say, okay, you go over there, I'm going to go fight now?
Well, that is true. Like a lot of the class features that do involve this kind of stuff now, they really have taken that into account and go, well, it's just going to, you can resummon it, or you can resurrect it, or they've gone out of their way to go, well, this is a big part of that class, and yeah, it's probably going to die.
So, but if you're not playing someone who summons a familiar or an animal companion or a special mount, then you're falling to the wayside of, okay, well, when it dies, it dies. You have to heal it like a regular person in the party, and you have to resurrect it like a normal person in the party when it dies.
Or you're like, Boris 37 is a steadfast companion.
And like I would start, playing around with, a person that does that. It's like, oh, I'm going to keep buying boars because they keep dying. Well, the boars are going to start bucking, and they're going to have an issue just because there's some kind of aura that's like, these guys keep killing me.
The death aura. Yeah, well, or maybe not so much that, but you're like, wherever you go to get them, and the guy's like, weren't you here just last week? Come on. Like, I want to make a buck, but, I kind of like animals. So that's one way. And then the other way is, you can then use those companions to not only interact, but then they start to define the characters, but also NPCs as well. So if you go into a culture where, a particular mount that's not your run-of-the-mill mount has some significance, that's going to be reflected in that culture. And, that was kind of like one of the fun things to do for me when I introduced the Olengai Orc tribe. And they weren't really adversaries for the players, but they kind of went to them and they needed to do something. And, from everything that they did, they could just see what a huge part this animal played in this tribe's lives.
Now, the other side of that coin is you could have something that's a little bit more fearsome as a mount, and what happens when you walk into town and you're probably not riding a nightmare, but what does the people of Gryffindor say when Alan rides into town on the Dranther? That's not a easily standard thing for humans to be saying. This draconic monstrosity that's big enough to carry someone as massive as him.
Yeah, and that's another avenue we haven't even really explored that much. And we forgot to mention as well, because in my game we do have the Dranthers that are basically just riding drakes that the Dragonborn use.
Right.
So, that's another thing. And it also kind of defines... It also defines our dragon realm and that culture as well. And also the fact that someone else wanted to acquire a War Dranther. And they couldn't because only knights... only Dragonborn knights ride them.
Right.
It's also a matter of station as well. A status symbol. So there's that too. So there's all these different ways that you can incorporate it into your game. Matter of fact, in the last of the Renshai trilogy, there's a scene where one of the main characters, Colby, is actually recognized as a knight of a specific order because of his mount, and like the only way he could actually have that mount is to be part of that order.
Right.
So, and that's just a regular horse, but a particular breed or whatever.
Right.
So there's definitely different ways as this can influence your game, and even like the Riders of Rohan in Middle Earth. Again, they're horse lords.
They care about the horses, and when they come upon Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn, and they need mounts, it's like, here, this is such and such and such and such. They serve their masters well, allow them to do the same for you. And he knew, he's got 2,000 men behind him, and he knew the names of those two horses. That takes a certain kind of person. Yeah,
so you can make, whether it's a mundane mount or a fantastic mount, you can make the fantastic scenes in your game.
So what do you guys think out there? Do you got any cool mount stories that we didn't mention? Is there something awesome that you wrote as a player or one of your players? Put them down in the comments below. While you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
You can find us over on Facebook.
So until next time, stay nerdy.
Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds, hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchy Ted.
And today we delve into the most fantastic Dungeons and Dragons mounts you could think about.
Hey guys, jump down to the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy, the newsletter. It's a great way to get gaming tips as well as learn how to game with Nerdarchy. But you know, we've had in the party. There's been belays, elks, giant spiders, there's all kinds. You currently have a boar, so like it's all of these ones have been outside the normal spectrum from what typical mounts are.
Yeah, and in my game, I have basically it's very much part of their lifestyle. Now, fantasy games are just rife with. Fantasy games, fantasy literature are rife with all kinds of examples. Also, in your game, did you mention the elk?
I think I said moose, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. Because Jeremy's paladin rode an elk in one of my previous games. Fantastic mounts in Dungeons and Dragons.
And where to find them?
So. We've done several mounted combat videos, mounted character builds, but what about mounts in general? So they've shown up a bunch of places in our games.
They have. We've had. It's not so much a mount.
The Goblin Ranger that rides a spider. There's actually two goblins, and they ride the spider everywhere. So so there's that. I introduced a mountain tribe of orcs called the Olingai, and Olingai in their language is sacred beast. And their sacred beast is the mountain goat, the giant mountain goat, and they ride, them. They use them for milk and make cheese, and